From the 22 News Plus studio, this is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of InFocus. I am your host, Patrick Berry. Thank you so very much for joining me. It is no secret to any of you that we have a housing crisis here in Massachusetts. If you own a home like I do, you're probably astonished at how much that home is valued at. The problem is the younger generation really has nowhere to move into because they're looking at our homes that have a high value. However, in 2024, Governor Healy signed a law about ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and it's a fascinating topic. So I brought into the 22 News Plus studio today Dave Coyne. He is the president of Home and Hearth Remodeling and Restoration. Dave, I want to thank you so very much to you for joining me today because I got your name from a mutual friend of ours, and because ADUs, accessory dwelling units, is a fascinating topic, and our mutual friend said you're sort of the expert, local go-to expert on it. So the bar's been set high. So explain to me what an ADU is.
Sure. We'll start with a little bit of background on what has changed and what people are hearing, and they're hearing this term ADUs, and they probably have a lot of questions about it. So quick background on this. In 2024, Governor Healy, I think it was back on August 6th of 2024, signed the Affordable Homes Act into law. And that was part of the larger acts of 2024, which is all the new legislation, and it's made up of many pieces. And the Affordable Homes Act specifically did two things. It changed the definition, the existing definition of what an accessory dwelling unit is, very slightly. But it also created a new clause in the zoning ordinances, in the Zoning Act, which is an established act that's been in existence. And it changed a paragraph in there to give homeowners unfettered right to build an additional dwelling unit on their properties if all of the other conditions that they would need to comply with can be met. Now,
so there's nothing that bars a homeowner like you or me from adding a separate unit on our property.
That's correct.
Except for local ordinance?
Except for local ordinances, which cannot be in conflict with the new state ordinance. There used to be a patchwork. So from one town to another town, the laws varied, and there'd be different zoning ordinances in place. Some communities were friendly when it came to the topic of building this additional dwelling unit on your home property. Others were strictly against it and would impose conditions that would make it effectively impossible. They'd either ban it outright, or they would tell you that it would have to be owner-occupied or family-occupied, or that it would require a restrictive number of additional parking spaces, or other kinds of restrictions that made it impractical or impossible to build.
It sounds like there's a lot of misinformation out there about ADUs.
There is currently. I guess the most important thing for people to know is that if you have the space and can meet the local zoning requirements in your town, you absolutely have the right now to build a small accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, so I'm going to pull up an image about this is the various types of ADUs. You've got an internal, an attached, and a detached. Okay, so walk through the three different types for me. I mean, the picture kind of explains it, but walk through the three.
Sure. Well, first of all, let's define what an ADU is.
Okay.
And the definition has existed for a long time. Basically, it's an accessory structure that has sleeping, cooking, and bathing spaces in a self-contained dwelling. It can be up to 900 square feet or half the square footage of the principal dwelling. What is that principal dwelling square footage? Well, when you bought your house, if they told you it was a 2,400 square foot house, 2,400 square feet is the number.
You can look it up on your
exactly.
Online.
It's basically all the common livable, habitable rooms, not counting closets and things like that.
So let me interrupt you there for a second. You said 900 square feet or half of the square footage of the home. So let's say
whichever's smaller.
Whichever's smaller.
Yes.
Okay, so if you've got a 3,000 square foot home, you can't be building a 1,500 square foot ADU. 900 is the maximum you can build.
Right. Now, that would be unless a local community allows you to build something in excess of the state standard. Okay. You can't go under, but you could go over.
Okay.
For instance, or I mean, you could go under. You could build less than 900. But as far as the municipality goes, they have to let you build up to half the square footage or 900 square feet, whichever is less. But if they choose to lessen those regulations and allow larger ADUs in their communities, they have the right to do that.
Okay. Perfect.
So back to the topic of the definition of the ADU, it must also have its own separate egress. It can
Okay.
be a shared hallway, so you can have a foyer or a mudroom in a principal dwelling that has a door that leads to a separate apartment effectively. I mean, we're all familiar with this with two-family apartment buildings. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. They have separate entrances. Other than that, you can pretty much do what you'd like and call it an ADU. You can build it in the basement of your home. You can put it over a garage and finish off the space there. Those would be two examples of in-home or within the footprint ADUs. The next
So
kind,
like Greg Brady's attic apartment, right?
right. Well, you would need to make a separate egress to it,
Right.
right? And it would have to have a bathroom and a kitchen and
Okay.
sleeping space. As a matter of fact, we're looking at a project in Agawam right now, which is a three-car garage with semi-finished space above. They built it with the idea of eventually finishing it off, so it already has HVAC and some wiring and some insulation. And now we can build it out the rest of the way. So we put together the floor plan. We've got all the quotes from subcontractors, and we've got the estimate together, and we're hoping to sign a contract on that pretty soon. And it already had a separate egress, which is a long stairwell, and it's
Right.
going to be for use for the in-laws, who I hope
Okay.
have good knees with those long stairs.
Well, so that's another good point is we talk about the purposes of an ADU. You talk about in-law suite, but it could be in-laws, it could be your kid, like our kids,
Yeah,
who are
yeah.
having a very difficult time affording their own place. Maybe the parents want to add on or add a separate living
Yep.
space for their kids.
Well, the in-house ADU is your least expensive because you're not modifying the building footprint. You're
Right.
able to tie into the existing utilities more easily. The next most more expensive and next type of ADU would be one that's an addition where you are physically changing the footprint of the house, usually with an addition off the back or another L on the side of the house. It depends on the type of house you have. You could go up another story if you've got a single family one floor ranch, for instance.
But for an attached or detached, you still need to talk to your local building department for the codes of how close can I get to the property line of my
Hmm.
neighbor or so forth.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there are lot coverage requirements. So if you're already at that percentage that is allowed by law for the structure to cover your lot, you can't build any more. If you don't have the setbacks in your neighborhood, be it 10 feet, 20 feet, 15 feet, it varies by town, in the rear and on the sides, then you might be restricted from what you want to do. And where that really becomes important is if you're thinking about a detached ADU,
Okay.
because now you're building a separate freestanding structure and you have to place that someplace on that lot where it won't encroach on the boundaries that are required by law and won't encroach on height requirements. Now, one thing that's interesting is the Attorney General's office recently spoke or made a determination in a case with, I think it was Bridgewater, East Bridgewater, one of the towns out there, had a requirement that an ADU could not be more than 1 story tall. That was found to be in conflict with the new zoning codes. And what they said was that no, in fact, your ADU can be just as tall as the primary structure. So, in other words, whatever the zoning requirement is on the principal dwelling, that would apply to the ADU.
Fascinating. We're up on our first commercial break, and we've only touched the surface of accessory dwelling units. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of In Focus. I am your host, Patrick Berry. Dave Coyne is across the desk from me. We're here in the 22 News Plus studios. We're talking about accessory dwelling units. And Dave, before we went to the break, you talked about a decision that happened in the eastern end of the state about the height of an ADU. So, all right, so I've got a 2-floor house. So I live in Westfield. I don't know if you know specific codes about Westfield or not, but can I build an ADU that's the same height as my current house?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But I couldn't go higher than that. Like I couldn't do a 3-floor, right?
Well, it would depend on what your town allows. If a
Okay.
town allows for more than 2 stories, then you can build an ADU that conforms to that. Basically, what the Attorney General said in this case that affirmed the state's definition of ADUs and their primacy in terms of who's got the final say over local zoning in these issues, they said that you have to follow whatever the code is in that district for the principal dwelling. So if you can build a 2-story home in your neighborhood, you can build a 2-story ADU, again, if the rest of the project will conform to
So
local zoning.
if my specific neighborhood had no height restriction, but who wants to build a 4-story home, right, in a neighborhood? It would look odd. But if there is no height restriction, could I put a 4-story ADU in my backyard, 4 flats, and rent them
Probably
out?
not.
Really?
Probably not.
Okay.
Because under the building code, once you get above a certain height or a certain number of stories, it's no longer considered a residential single-family dwelling. And the
Okay.
ADU law is specifically for single-family dwellings, although it can also apply to multi-units. For instance, if you have a duplex on your property that you're already renting out, and you want to put another rental property in the form of an ADU in the backyard, or put an addition to add to it and build another living unit as an ADU, you can.
Okay. If I have already added, say a separate ADU for my mother-in-law, I'm making this up, can I add a totally different ADU for my kid if she moves
Well,
home?
that's a great question. And that gets into a term that some people may hear thrown about when discussing ADUs. Often you'll see something called a protected use ADU. And what that means is that your first ADU you want to build on your property is protected by this new law
Okay.
that governs the definition of an ADU and what a town can or can't do to permit or disallow construction of an ADU. So your first one, you are able to build by right. So think of by right and protected as meaning the same
Okay.
thing. So when they say you can build an ADU by right, that means it is a protected ADU under the zoning. The state has control over what you can and can't do in that context. The second or third or fourth ADUs, totally different ball of wax. The
Interesting.
municipality has the ability to either allow or disallow additional ADUs. And if you are going to build a second or third or sixth ADU, it does require a special permit.
Okay.
Whereas the principal ADU is protected, does not require a special permit, but it does still require a building permit and all of the trade permits that go with that. So when you're going to build an addition, or if you're going to build a freestanding ADU, you've got plumbing, you've got electrical, you've got sewerage, you've got HVAC. All of those things require permitting and licensing as if you were building any other new structure.
Okay, so there's a strong movement across the country about tiny homes. You keep talking about building a structure. Here in Massachusetts, does it have to be a build from the ground up structure, or can I, buy an ADU or a tiny home, wheel it in my backyard, and plop it down?
That's a great question, and actually, it's a
I got
really
a million of them,
no,
Dave.
this is a really exciting area for development. The modular home manufacturers in this country would seem to be perfectly positioned for popping out tiny
Yeah.
homes. Now, a lot of tiny homes in the tiny home movement, a lot of them you find are on wheels. Like if you Google
Right.
tiny homes,
Exactly.
a lot of them are on trailers. I don't know why. Because I don't
I
think
can
most
take
people
it off the trailer and
well,
put it
yeah, I
on the
mean,
ground.
I suppose if you want to move it from place to place. I mean, it's an RV at that point, right?
Right,
It's just a
exactly.
glorified RV. What is interesting is that Massachusetts has fairly restrictive laws when it comes to modular homes. There isn't a lot of modular development in Massachusetts compared to some other states around us. And in fact, as far as I know, there are only like 1 or 2 modular builders in Massachusetts because Massachusetts has pretty strict licensing and regulatory requirements for modular home builders. And the inspection process is very onerous. So the modular home
Really?
builders in Pennsylvania or other states don't generally do a lot of business up here. But I did speak with somebody recently who is getting into the modular business. He's already producing some modular homes. He does modular multifamily units where you can piece these different
Okay.
sections of the building together to make an apartment building. And he is looking at this new ADU environment as a business opportunity, which I think makes a lot of sense because it does make tremendous sense to build something, to buy something rather than build it. And with modular development, the costs are a lot less because you're not impacted by weather. You have constant light, power, heat, everything you need under one roof. So it's a lot more efficient to build. You can control the construction conditions. And if somebody had the decision to make between building it from scratch on their lot or buying and dropping one in, it's almost always going to be cheaper to buy one and drop one in.
Now, are modular homes and mobile homes different? Because there are a ton of mobile home parks in our area.
They're
Same but
they're
different.
animals in the same phylum,
Okay.
let's say. They're similar. Mobile homes, which really aren't all that terribly mobile, of course, once they're
Right,
set in
exactly.
place, they are modular homes.
Right.
And they're an older form of modular home, but the industry has just grown leaps and bounds beyond what we think of as the old trailer park mobile homes.
If folks, if you ever have a chance to, you know, do an internet search for mobile homes, you would be astounded at what some of these things look like nowadays. They're not the
Mhm.
mobile homes you remember from the 50s and
Oh
60s and
yeah.
70s.
No, modular development can look like any other single family home. I have a friend who's a developer and put some units in up in upstate New York, and they're beautiful homes. The only giveaway is that when they put the pieces of the homes together, you have super thick walls. So you go through a doorway that's a foot wide on the jamb, and that's
But
because that's where they stitch things together and they run the utilities through there.
but that's okay.
Oh yeah, no,
It's
that's fine. Yeah.
you'd never even notice it if you didn't point it out.
The build quality is typically higher in a modular constructed home than in a stick-built home.
And this is a whole different rabbit hole of questions I'm going down now. But
But
you said the inspection process in Massachusetts on a modular home is much more onerous than a built from scratch home. But you
yes.
just said it's a better constructed home.
Yeah, absolutely, because they have to build to very tight specs and standards, and they have to undergo a number of different inspections, which I'm not an expert on.
Plus, you have to
But
move it, so it's got to stay structurally sound from A to B.
yep, yep, and there are size limitations in terms of what you can put on the road.
Right.
So hence it's modular. You make pieces of the rooms in the home, you pre-assemble panels and things, and then you take the pieces and you stick them together more quickly on site. So you're not building stick by stick.
Interesting. All right.
What's really interesting too is I don't know if you're aware of this, but
You know what?
Amazon.com.
Hold that thought because we got to go to a commercial break. We'll come back with online home purchases in a second. We'll be right back.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of In Focus. I am your host, Patrick Berry. We're here in the 22 News Plus studios, and we're talking about housing here in Massachusetts. Dave Coyne is across the desk from me. He is the president of Home and Hearth Remodeling and Restoration, and we've been talking about ADUs, accessory dwelling units, that in 2024, Governor Healy signed a law that says you have the right to put up an ADU on your property. There are certain rules and regulations you need to abide by, no bigger than 900 square feet, you know, and then there's a local building guidelines that you need to follow up on. But just before the break, we were talking about difference between modular homes and mobile homes, tiny homes, and you hinted at Amazon.
Yes.
And I know you can buy a home on Amazon, but explain to me why that's not such a great idea.
Yeah, it's unfortunately with any new opportunity, there's always a bit of a gold rush mentality.
Mhm.
So with tiny homes, now with ADUs amplifying the kind of attention on tiny homes, you're seeing a lot of people that are just throwing stuff out there to see what they can sell. And there's always a lot of fine print, plenty of catches involved. I've seen homes for close to $10,000 being sold as tiny homes on Amazon. Unfortunately, they're not realistic. You
Right.
cannot buy a house ready to live in for $10,000 on Amazon,
No.
nor would you be able to get it to the site, install it, and hook it up to all the utilities for anything close to that. Much more realistic is for a modular, it would depend on the size, but a freestanding tiny home, if you were to build it from scratch, is really almost the same price as building a regular single family home from scratch because that's effectively what you're doing.
Right.
So it's not a heck of a lot cheaper. So if it's going to cost you $300,000 to $400,000 to build a single family home on that lot, probably going to be kind of near the low end of that scale still to build a decent tiny home. Now, with the modular homes, hopefully we get that cost down so that you can purchase a structure that just needs to be plopped on site, needs to be supported with some kind of a foundation or a pad, needs to have the water, electrical, sewerage hookups, etc. And there are significant expenses that attend those activities.
Plus a driveway and landscaping,
Well, you know, you can
depending on
have
what you want to
can
do.
park on the grass, dirt driveway.
Right.
You know, you
You
don't
can get low
have
key.
to do
Yeah.
those things. You can get low key, but you got to hook it up to the water.
Right.
And a plumber
And
costs money.
electricity.
You got to hook up to electricity. The home, the principal dwelling, may not have enough power coming in to be able to support another structure attached to it. In the remodeling work that we do, we still see many, many homes that only have 100 amp service panels in their homes. And when they want to upgrade and put in a kitchen, one of the first things they have to do is spend $6,000 to $7,000 to get a whole new electrical feed to their house that has higher voltage. and they can go up to a 200 amp panel, and that will support a lot of their needs. Although now we're actually seeing that there is so much electrical draw on so many of these homes, particularly the larger ones. Some of them are being forced to go to 400 amp panels.
Really? Well, you think about it, we're in a power hungry society right now with all our phones, computers, everything. My fridge tells me I'm low on milk.
Right.
It's that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I never even thought of that. If you've got this great idea of building the in-law suite or a place for your kids to live in the backyard, if you don't already have enough power there, going to the main residence, it's a whole separate expense you got to take.
So you've got to upgrade your panel now, as well as get the wiring out to that tiny home. And if it's a new tiny home, the cost of wiring a home. If it's a modular tiny home, something off of Amazon or from wherever, you have the hookups there, but there's still some amount of wiring that needs to be done to connect everything and get it running.
If somebody that's watching this conversation right now is interested in putting an ADU on their property for whatever reason, rental income, in-law suite, kids, whatever it might be, what's the first step they should be doing?
Well, the first step is to do a feasibility study, which you can do on your own, or you can speak with a contractor. And there is actually now a company called thebuilder.ai that I've recently come across.
Thebuilder.ai.
Thebuilder.ai, that's their URL. They have a really cool tool, which you're going to be incorporating into our website soon, which is an ADU feasibility lookup tool. And basically, you pop your address in there, and it will generate a report that shows you your lot. It takes information from the property card information that's already available through Global Information's, GIS website information on each town's website. And it will show you on top of that sort of topography lines, so you know if it's a hilly or a flat lot. It'll show you what your boundaries are. It will tell you what your local zoning ordinances are.
Wow.
It will give you all the information you need, and then show you where and what size ADU configurations may be possible on your lot.
So the builder.ai will really help you out with all of that. That's the starting gate.
Yep.
And then talk to a builder, talk to your local building department.
Yep. Exactly. The tool that this company has a sort of a light version for property owners to do their own lookup, but then there's also a more detailed pro version that we can use that will give us more detailed information on the feasibility of it. Because obviously you don't want to start spending money until you know if you're going to be able to see this dream come to reality.
And should you explore your different options? We started, the build from the ground up, or remodel an existing basement, attic, whatever it might be, remodel your garage to a accessory dwelling unit, or some sort of modular addition. So do the research, find out what it's going to cost, not only from the build, from the structure, but in electricity.
A couple of different factors there to consider, right? One is, what is your feasible budget?
Yeah.
So that may determine whether or not you could do detached versus attached versus an within the house footprint. The other thing is the purpose behind it, the need. Is this to house a close family member, in which case you might want to keep them closer? So you do an addition or do the basement or the attic. If it's something that you're looking to generate additional income from, it might be easier to have a structure that's attached to the main structure, but separated enough so that it feels like a separate apartment. And then if you really want full privacy in your principal dwelling, then you stick the ADU out in the back. And, if your guests or your people renting are out there, they're far enough from you that they're not going to bother you at all.
You bring up an important part. I know some of the local ordinances, it can't be used as a short-term rental, like an Airbnb type thing. It's got to be a permanent residence.
And the state law does not change that. Communities may still restrict short-term rentals. And short-term rental is typically defined as less than 1 year, although some communities might have different definitions. It might be, less than 6 months.
Okay.
But the law doesn't change that. Communities are still on their own as far as determining whether or not they're going to permit that. But if they do permit it, they can't restrict you from using your ADU as a rental.
Fantastic.
So it provides income opportunities. It provides living opportunities. We're even hearing some situations where people who've grown up in the town and have raised their family want to downsize, but they don't want to move. They like their neighborhood. They want to stay around. And coincidentally, their kids need a place to live.
Right.
So it's an opportunity for them to cede the main house to their children and build an ADU, either attached or detached, and still be in their neighborhood and on their property.
My kids would love that because I'd still be doing the yard work and the snow shoveling. Dave Coyne, I can't thank you enough for joining me. Fascinating conversation. Good seeing you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.